This is the story of something I saw with my own eyes, something I will never forget. This is one of those disturbing true warehouse horror stories that still makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It happened a few years ago. I used to work night shifts at a storage warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy, just rows and rows of shelves stacked with boxes, electronics, furniture, stuff that people left behind or companies stored for cheap. It was a lonely job, but I liked the silence. Most nights were quiet, just the soft hum of the lights and the occasional creak of the old metal beams. But one night changed everything. It was a Friday. I remember because I had made plans to grab breakfast with my friend after work. I clocked in at 10 p.m. and took my usual round, checking locks, scanning inventory, logging entries. My flashlight beam danced over dusty crates and half-torn cardboard, nothing out of the ordinary, until I passed by section 14. There was this weird sound, not loud but strange, like soft tapping. I stopped, listened. It stopped too. I thought it was just a rat. We had those sometimes. But when I moved again, I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. Like fingernails on a wooden box. I aimed my flashlight between the shelves, expecting to see a rat or a loose wire, but there was nothing. Just an old wooden crate. No label, no tape. Just sitting there like it didn't belong. I felt uneasy, but I kept walking. I didn't want to waste time. Probably just my imagination. A few hours later, maybe around 1:30 a.m., I went to the security room to check the monitors. That's when I noticed something weird. The camera feed for section 14 was frozen. Static lines ran across the screen. It had been fine earlier. I leaned in trying to fix it, and suddenly the feed came back. But what I saw nearly made my heart stop. That crate, the same one I saw earlier, it was now open. But not just open. The lid was broken off like it had been forced from the inside. Pieces of wood were scattered across the floor, and standing next to it was something. It was tall, skinny, pale. Its arms looked too long for its body. I couldn't see its face. Its head was tilted down. The way it stood, it didn't move like a person. It was like it was twitching. I blinked, and the screen went to static again. I jumped out of my seat and ran down the hallway toward section 14. I know it was a stupid idea. I don't know what I was thinking. But I had to see it for myself when I got there. Nothing. The crate was still there, yes, but it was sealed. Perfectly sealed. No broken lid. No scattered wood. Just sitting there, just like before. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the monitor had glitched. I turned to leave, but then I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. This time it was louder, closer. I froze. The tapping was coming from inside the crate. I stood there, my breath caught in my throat. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Then something knocked from inside. 1, 2, 3 knocks. Then silence. I backed away slowly, then ran. I ran back to the security room, locked the door, and sat there with my eyes glued to the monitors. I watched every corner of that warehouse until sunrise. The next morning, I told my supervisor. He laughed, said I probably had too much coffee or not enough sleep. But then, his face changed when I showed him the footage from the night before. The camera feed was gone, all of it. Everything from midnight to 4 a.m. Wiped. He looked confused. Said it must have been a technical problem. He didn't want to talk about it again. Told me to go home and rest, but that wasn't the end. The next week, a new guy joined the night shift. Ben. Young guy, always curious, always asking questions. I warned him about Section 14, told him something wasn't right. He laughed it off. A few days later, Ben didn't show up for his shift. We thought he overslept or quit. But when they checked the footage, he was there. He had gone to Section 14 around 2 a.m., and then the screen went black. His car was still in the parking lot. His phone was found near the loading dock. But Ben was gone. Just gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, no broken doors. It was like he had vanished into thin air. The police got involved, of course. They searched every inch of that warehouse. Dogs, drones, everything. Nothing turned up. And that crate? Still there. Still sealed. After Ben disappeared, no one wanted the night shift. I didn't blame them. I quit 2 days later. I packed my things and left that place behind. I didn't even collect my last paycheck. A few months later, I heard that the warehouse caught fire. Some electrical short. Burned half the place down. No one was hurt. But guess what? The only thing that survived the fire, untouched, was Section 14, and that crate, still there, still sealed. I've tried to forget about it, tried to move on. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about that tapping. That soft knock from something that shouldn't exist. I wake up covered in sweat, heart racing, afraid to look toward the shadows in the corner of my room. People laugh when I tell this story. They say it's just stress or a made-up tale to scare others. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And Ben? Well, he never came back. So if you ever find yourself working in a quiet, empty warehouse in the middle of the night and you hear a soft tapping from a crate with no label, don't go near it. Walk away. Don't look back. Don't listen to the knock. Some things are better left sealed. And that's the story I had to tell you. Believe it or not, it happened. And I'll never set foot in a warehouse again. This is the story of something truly disturbing that happened to my friend Mark. I wasn't there, but he told me everything in such detail that I still remember it like it happened to me. It's one of those true warehouse horror stories that sticks in your mind, no matter how hard you try to forget. Mark used to work as a forklift operator at an old shipping warehouse in a small town in Indiana. It wasn't a big place, just a few long aisles of crates, pallets, and stacked goods, most of them stored for other companies. He worked the late shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., with only one other guy named Jerry in the building during those hours. Most nights were boring, slow, but one night, everything changed. Mark said it all started when a strange shipment arrived. No one had it on the schedule. No paperwork, no tracking ID, no delivery notice. The truck just showed up, dropped a giant steel container in the back, and drove off before anyone could ask a question. Jerry thought it was a mistake, but Mark was curious. He told me the container was unlike anything he'd seen. It looked military, thick steel walls, bolts all around, and no labels at all. The only marking was a painted number on the side, 0319B. They tried to open it, but the thing was locked tight. No keyhole, no keypad, nothing. Jerry called the manager in the morning, who promised to look into it, but the container stayed there, untouched. That's when the strange things began. A few nights later, around 2:30 a.m., Mark was doing inventory near the loading dock. Jerry was off somewhere on his smoke break. The warehouse was dead silent, except for the buzz of the overhead lights. Suddenly, Mark heard a low humming noise. He looked around, thinking it was the forklift acting up again, but it wasn't the forklift. The sound was coming from the container. He walked closer, and as he did, the humming got louder. Then, it stopped, just like that. He said it was like someone had turned off a machine inside the steel box the moment he got near. He stood there staring at it, feeling this weird pressure in the air like the air itself was thicker. Then came the knock. 3 loud, slow knocks. Bang, bang, bang from inside the container. He froze. His first thought was, someone was trapped inside. Maybe a worker, a driver, or even something alive. He yelled out, "Hello? Is someone in there?" But no reply. Just silence. He ran to get Jerry. When they came back together, the container was quiet again. No humming, no knocking. Jerry said Mark was imagining things, maybe tired, maybe stressed. They walked away, but Mark couldn't stop thinking about it. The next night, the power cut out at exactly 3 a.m. Not just a flicker, a full blackout. The emergency lights kicked on, casting dim red light all across the warehouse. Mark and Jerry met in the main hallway, trying to figure out what was going on. That's when they both heard it. The sound of chains dragging across the concrete floor, slow, heavy, metal scraping on the ground. It came from the direction of the container. Mark said his heart was beating so hard he could barely breathe. Jerry, who always acted tough, turned pale. They stayed frozen for a few seconds, then grabbed flashlights and started walking toward the sound. But when they reached the back of the warehouse, the container was gone. Just gone. No forklift marks, no tire tracks, nothing. Like it had vanished. Mark said Jerry looked like he was going to be sick. They searched the entire building, every corner, every locked room. Nothing. They called the police. The officers came, searched the place, asked questions, but left after a while, clearly thinking it was a prank or some kind of misunderstanding. But Mark swore he saw it. He knew it had been there. They both did. For the next few days, things got worse. Mark would hear whispering around the shelves when he was alone, faint voices calling his name, even though no one was near. He started seeing shadows moving at the edge of his flashlight beam. Jerry refused to go near the loading dock. He said he dreamed of metal doors opening and something crawling out of them. One night, Jerry didn't come to work. No call, no warning. Just didn't show up. Mark tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. When he asked the manager, the next morning, they told him Jerry had quit by email, saying only, "I can't work there anymore. It knows my name." That was the last anyone heard from him. Mark had to work the night shift alone for the rest of the week. Then came the final night. He said it started normally, just the sound of the building settling, the distant train whistles from the nearby tracks. Around 3:20 a.m., the power cut again, just like before. Red emergency lights buzzed on. Mark stood in the main hallway listening. Then he heard footsteps, slow, heavy, steady, coming from aisle 6. He aimed his flashlight and walked toward the sound. The light flickered, but he kept going. And then, he saw it. A figure, tall and thin, stood at the end of the aisle. Its skin was pale and stretched, like it didn't fit its bones. No eyes, just empty sockets. Its arms dragged long, broken chains behind it. And its face. Mark said its face looked stitched shut, like someone had sewn its mouth closed to stop it from screaming. It didn't move at first. Then it tilted its head, like it was listening. And it whispered Mark's name, even with its mouth stitched shut. Mark ran. He ran through the aisles, past the pallets, past the exit. But the doors were sealed shut. He kicked, banged, screamed, but the doors wouldn't open. The figure followed. Slow, calm, chains dragging louder and louder. Mark ran to the manager's office, locked the door, and hid behind the desk. The lights flickered out. Complete darkness. Then came the sound of chains outside the door, and a knock. 1, 2, 3. The knob turned, but the lock held. Then silence. Mark stayed hidden until the sun came up and the morning crew arrived. When they found him, he was curled up in the corner, shaking. He told them everything. But the cameras showed nothing. No figure, no container, nothing. He quit the same day, moved to another city. Last I heard, he never worked another night shift again. But sometimes when I visit that town and pass by the warehouse, I look toward the back lot. And once, I swear I saw a steel container sitting there, painted number 0319B. If you ever work night shift in a warehouse and a container shows up with no label, don't open it, don't go near it. And whatever you do, don't listen when it calls your name. That's the disturbing warehouse story I had to tell you. It still gives me chills. And if Mark was telling the truth, and I believe he was, then something evil is still out there, waiting in the dark. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Greg. I'll tell you right now, it's not something you'd want to experience, not ever. It's one of those disturbing, true warehouse horror stories that'll make you think twice before setting foot in a warehouse again. Greg worked at a large industrial warehouse on the edge of the city. It wasn't the kind of warehouse that dealt with flashy products or fancy goods. It was the kind of place that stored industrial parts, old machines, and heavy equipment. The building was huge, with metal shelves reaching high up to the ceiling and concrete floors that always seemed to echo. Greg worked the night shift, starting at 10 p.m. and finishing at 6 a.m. He'd usually spend his time moving boxes, organizing parts, and running inventory reports on his tablet. It was a lonely job, but he didn't mind the solitude. Everything was normal for the first few weeks. Then, one night, something happened that would change everything. It started like any other shift. The night was quiet. The only sounds were the clinking of metal and the soft hum of the overhead lights. But around midnight, Greg noticed something strange. A large wooden crate had appeared at the back of the warehouse near the loading dock. It wasn't there when he had done his usual rounds earlier, and it certainly wasn't scheduled for delivery. The crate was huge, at least 8 feet long, and it had no labels or markings on it. Just plain, unmarked wood sitting in the corner, like it had always been there. Greg wasn't one to overthink things, so he just assumed it was a mistake or maybe something that had been overlooked. He decided to check it out, but when he approached, he felt a chill run down his spine. The air around the crate felt heavy, like something was off. He tried to shake off the feeling and ran his hand along the side of the crate, but he couldn't shake the unease crawling up his back. There was something wrong about it. He walked away, trying to focus on his tasks, but his mind kept drifting back to that crate. He couldn't explain it, but something about it bothered him. Around 2 a.m., Greg decided to go back and take another look. Maybe it was just his imagination running wild. but he needed to know. As he approached the crate, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. This time, the crate was slightly open. Just a small gap between the wooden slats. Greg felt a strange compulsion to look inside. He hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of him. He pulled open the crate. Inside, he found an old, rusted piece of machinery, something that looked like a mix between an old generator and a mechanical spider. It was covered in dust and had wires hanging out of it, making it look even more ominous. But what caught Greg's attention wasn't the machine. It was the sound. There was a soft, low hum coming from it. It was barely audible, but it was there. Greg felt a shiver crawl up his spine. He leaned in closer to inspect it, but the moment his hand brushed against the machine, the hum stopped. Suddenly, the warehouse felt even more silent than before. Greg quickly stepped back, heart pounding in his chest. He closed the crate and backed away, telling himself that he was just imagining things. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but Greg couldn't stop thinking about that machine. The next night, he came back to work. As soon as he entered the building, he noticed something different. The crate was gone. Vanished. He checked every corner of the warehouse, but there was no sign of it. It was like it had never been there. Greg told his coworker Pete about it the next day. Pete didn't believe him at first. "You sure you didn't just dream it?" he asked, laughing. "Maybe you need to get more sleep." But Greg was certain he knew what he'd seen. The weeks passed, and nothing strange happened until one night, about a month later. Greg was working late again, moving boxes and checking inventory, when he noticed something strange. There was a low, buzzing sound coming from somewhere deep in the warehouse. At first, he thought it was just a faulty light or the sound of machinery, but it didn't stop. It kept going, a constant hum, almost like a voice. The noise was coming from the same spot as the crate had been. Greg tried to ignore it, but the sound grew louder. It started to feel like the walls themselves were vibrating. His heart raced as he slowly made his way toward the noise, dreading what he might find. When he reached the spot, he saw something that froze him in place. The crate was back. It was exactly the same, old, wooden, and unmarked. But it was different this time. The crate was open, wide enough that Greg could see the dark, rusted machine inside. And as he stared at it, the machine moved. It twitched, slowly at first, then jerked violently. The wires hanging from it seemed to pulse, and the low humming sound was now accompanied by a strange clicking noise. Greg stepped back, his legs shaking. He felt a cold sweat drip down his neck, and then, for the first time, he heard a voice, not a whisper, but a loud, guttural sound, like something trying to speak through static. "Greg." The voice wasn't human. It was distorted, like it was coming from a broken radio. But it was clear enough that Greg heard his name. His blood ran cold. Before he could react, the machine suddenly stopped moving. The hum faded. The warehouse went silent. Greg stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. He decided it was time to leave. He ran toward the exit, but as he passed the loading dock, he noticed something that made his blood run even colder. There, on the floor near the door, was a small metal key. It was the kind of key you'd find on an old lock. It wasn't there earlier. Greg bent down and picked it up, his mind racing. As soon as his fingers touched it, the warehouse lights flickered, and he heard the same voice again. "Greg, you shouldn't have touched it." That was the last straw. He dropped the key and ran out of the building as fast as he could. The next morning, Greg told Pete everything. Pete didn't believe him, But Greg wasn't about to go back there. He quit that same day and moved away, leaving the warehouse behind, for good. To this day, no one knows where the crate came from. No one knows who put that strange machine there, or why. The warehouse was eventually shut down, but they never found any records of the delivery or any information about the crate. As for Greg, he never spoke about it again, but every time I see him, I can tell that something still haunts him. So if you ever find yourself working the night shift at a warehouse and you hear strange humming or see an unmarked crate, maybe don't investigate. Some things are best left alone. That's the disturbing true warehouse horror story I had to tell you. And trust me, I'm glad it wasn't me who had to live through it. This is the story of Emily, a young woman who thought she'd signed up for a typical job in a warehouse. She didn't know what she was walking into when she took that night shift position at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. But let me tell you, things were never as simple as they seemed. This, my friend, is one of those disturbing true warehouse horror stories that you'll probably think twice about after hearing it. Emily had just moved to the city, looking for a steady job, to pay the bills while she searched for something better. The warehouse wasn't her dream job, but it was a paycheck, and it seemed like a good opportunity. The building itself was old, and the company wasn't exactly top of the line, but the pay was decent. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly lifting boxes and stacking pallets, but it was enough to get by. The warehouse wasn't in the best part of town, and the area was pretty quiet at night with not much happening. Her first few nights went by without anything unusual. She spent her time unloading deliveries, sorting boxes, and listening to music on her headphones to pass the time. It was lonely work, but it was also peaceful in a way. There was something calming about being in a giant, empty warehouse with the hum of the overhead lights and the occasional clink of metal. It wasn't until the fourth night that things started to get strange. Around 3 a.m., Emily was walking down one of the long aisles when she heard a strange sound. It wasn't anything loud, just a faint scraping noise, like something was being dragged across the concrete floor. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She quickly glanced around, but there was nothing. The aisle was empty, just rows of stacked boxes and shelves. Thinking it was just the wind or maybe the old building creaking, she dismissed it and kept walking. But then it happened again. This time, the scraping noise was louder, closer. It sounded like it was coming from one of the far corners of the warehouse. Emily's pulse quickened as she glanced over her shoulder, scanning the shadows. The noise was so strange. There was no machinery in that area, nothing that should have been making that sound. Probably a rat, Emily muttered to herself. She wasn't scared, just unsettled. Still, she decided to take a quick walk to check it out, thinking it would ease her mind. She grabbed her flashlight and made her way toward the corner where the noise was coming from. When she got there, the noise stopped. The warehouse was eerily silent again. Emily turned on her flashlight and started looking around the corner. She thought maybe a box had fallen or something was out of place. But as she moved closer, she noticed something strange. The concrete floor was smeared with what looked like mud, but it was too dark to tell for sure. It was a thick, almost sticky substance, and there were drag marks leading off toward the back of the warehouse. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. It didn't make sense. There was no reason for this to be here, and there certainly hadn't been any mud on the floor when she first walked through. As she turned to leave, her flashlight flickered and then went out. "Great," she muttered, shaking the flashlight. She cursed under her breath and tried to turn it back on. Finally, it clicked back to life. But just as she shone the light back toward the drag marks, something caught her eye. At the far end of the aisle stood a large metal door that she had never noticed before. It was barely visible in the dim light, hidden behind some shelves. The door was old, rusted, and looked like it hadn't been opened in years. But there it was, standing wide open, with no explanation for why it had been left like that. Emily didn't want to investigate. Something about the door made her stomach churn. But curiosity got the better of her. Slowly she walked toward it, the drag marks still leading her way. When she reached the door, she hesitated. Should she go in? What if it was just a storage room for old equipment or supplies? But the way the door was standing open, with no sign of anyone else around, unsettled her. It was like it had been waiting for her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Inside, the air was cold and musty. It smelled like old wood and mildew, the kind of smell that comes from things that haven't been touched in years. She could barely see, but the flashlight illuminated just enough to reveal a small dark room. There was nothing much in there, just a few scattered crates and broken pieces of machinery. But then she saw something that made her freeze. In the corner of the room, lying on the floor, was a small, old, weathered box. It didn't look like anything special, but it felt wrong. The moment she saw it, a sudden sense of dread washed over her. Against her better judgment, Emily walked over to the box. Her hand shook as she reached for it, and the moment her fingers touched the surface, a cold shock ran through her body. She pulled her hand back quickly, but it was too late. The box was already starting to move. It was small, but it shifted on the floor, slowly inching toward her. The noise started again, scraping like something was dragging itself across the floor. Emily stepped back, heart pounding, her breath coming in short gasps. The box stopped moving, but the scraping noise continued. It was as if something inside was trying to get out. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. Panic set in. She pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Her flashlight flickered once more, then went out completely. In the pitch-black darkness, the scraping sound grew louder, closer. Something was coming for her. She could feel it. She started to scream for help, but her voice was swallowed by the silence of the room. There was no one around. No one could hear her. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Emily bolted out of the room as fast as she could, her feet barely touching the ground. She ran down the aisles, not caring about the boxes she knocked over. She didn't stop until she reached the main exit, where she slammed her hand against the door, nearly tripping in her haste. The moment she stepped outside into the fresh air, she collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. She couldn't explain what had happened. She didn't know what was in that box, or who or what had been moving in the dark. But Emily never went back to that warehouse again. The next day, she tried to tell her boss about what she had experienced, but they brushed her off, saying it was probably just a malfunction or her imagination. She tried to quit, but they refused to let her leave without giving 2 weeks' notice. Eventually, Emily couldn't take it anymore and left anyway, never looking back. She heard later that the warehouse was shut down for good. They said it was because of financial troubles, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something else had happened. There was something inside that building, something that shouldn't have been there, waiting for the next person to come across it. And that's the story of Emily, the warehouse, and the strange box. So next time you're thinking about taking a night shift at a warehouse, remember her story, because who knows what you might find lurking in the dark.